Welcome to the Diary of Discovery, the podcast where we delve deep into the human experience of healing and transformation. I'm your host, Jacky Clarke, and each week we will sit down with inspiring individuals who have embarked on their own personal journeys of healing and self-discovery. From overcoming trauma to navigating life's challenges, our guests share their raw and honest stories, offering insights, wisdom, and hope to all who tune in. So grab your favorite cup of tea, find a cozy spot, and join us as we uncover the power of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of authenticity. This is the Diary of Discovery. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I am super excited today. We have such a special surprise for you all. Today, I am having the tables flipped and I am in the hot seat and I am going to be interviewed about my own personal healing journey by one of our previous guests, the lovely Emma. So Emma, thank you so much for joining me and choosing to be my interviewer.
So excited to be exploring this with you. And yeah, to have the tables turned. And how does it feel just for a moment, just knowing that we're going to be delving right into your own healing journey, just as we've done for everybody else?
It's really, really exciting, I think, for people to sort of come behind the scenes and see a little bit more about me. But I think it always is a little bit nerve-wracking. It just feels a little bit vulnerable, doesn't it? But I think one of the big things is if I'm asking my guests to do this, I have to be willing to do it myself. So I wanted to not make my episode be kind of too early in the series because I really wanted to make this about the guests. But as this episode launches, it is just before my birthday. And I felt it was a really kind of prime time to put out this episode all about me. So I'm very excited to do this.
I'm excited to be the one that gets to do this with you as well. So shall we dive in?
Yes.
Okay, so Jacky, what was it that led you to the healing moment that you want to share? What was the start of the journey for you?
So it's so interesting because now that I've been on a healing journey, I can look back and I can see so many moments where I probably should have healed. So I can see moments from my childhood, moments from being a young adult, and I can see clear patterns of where I just ran away from things and was like, nope, not dealing with that. Off we go, just run into the next thing. And when I look back, I think I did this multiple times, even just before my healing journey started. I was so resistant to feeling my feelings and being in that space of healing. So for me, in 2017, I was made redundant. My aunt passed away. She was my first immediate family member in a kind of short period to pass away. And I got married. So it was the biggest roller coaster of emotions that I've ever felt. And being made redundant wasn't a bad thing for me. I launched straight into contract work, started my own business, was making multiple six figures really quickly. It wasn't a bad thing. So it was kind of we sandwiched two really good things with this complete grief in the middle. And I just didn't want to know about it. I just pretended it didn't happen. Just kept pushing through, was it'll be fine. 2018 rolled around and we then had 3 more deaths of immediate family members. So I lost both of my grands and very tragically lost my cousin. He was only in his 30s. And again, I just went straight into and I know you'll understand this, my strengths. I went straight into super organizing. Just if I just organize everyone and everything around me, everything will be fine. It'll be fine. Nothing can go wrong if I'm in control of everything. And I held on white knuckled for dear life, thinking I can control this. This'll be fine. And I did that for a good 2 years. Just holding on with my at the fingernails, hoping that everything would be fine. And then in 2020, it all just fell apart. So we had the final death. So it was like just over a sort of 3 year period. We lost 5 immediate family members. My grandfather passed away. And the reason why it's so significant that this podcast is coming out pretty much on my birthday is because my grandfather passed away on my birthday of that year. And that was just like the tipping point for me. Like we were out, we were at a safari park in the UK, looking at all these amazing animals. We knew my grandfather was unwell, and I've always known that I'm like a super manifester. Like when I want something, I need something, it comes to me. Like I know that about myself. And myself and my dad have birthdays really close together. And all I kept thinking during that time is, I don't want him to pass away on my dad's birthday. Like, I don't want my dad to have to live with that. And I'd already been through, like, my gran passed away really close to our wedding anniversary, and her funeral was on my first wedding anniversary. My aunt had obviously passed away really close to our wedding. So I'd already dealt with this multiple times and kind of felt like I'll be okay, like I can deal with this. But I didn't want anyone else to have those like sad memories attached to something that's supposed to be a happy time. So I was like so insistent that like he would not pass away on my dad's birthday. Hadn't really thought through the fact that that meant he would probably pass away on mine. um, and I remember standing there and like the whole world just slowing. And like I'll never ever forget the moment. I was standing outside the cheetah enclosure, not the cheetah, the tiger enclosure. And there was this tiger just walking the perimeter of this enclosure. And like I remember just like my dad phoned, he told me what had happened, and everything in me, it was like this weird like ripple effect where everything just kind of like came apart in one go. And I remember looking at that tiger and I could relate to it so much because I felt just as trapped as it did. I felt like I was walking the same square route around my life without any escape, not knowing what the hell I was supposed to be doing. And within 2 days, I was sitting on my couch in floods of tears, telling my husband, like, I need help. I need help. I can't do this anymore. I can't survive like this anymore. I can't live like this anymore. Something's got to give. And that was the moment for me where I realized, like, I just wasn't going to put up with this anymore. I wasn't going to live this way anymore.
Wow. I mean, you've shared so much already about kind of what was going on for you. What is it? I mean, you talked about, you know, going to what was familiar. I know if I just organize the hell out of everything, I'm going to be okay. But that obviously was a strategy that worked maybe for a while, but I'm guessing not really in the long term as it turned out. What is it that you feel that you had to embrace about yourself in order to go on what inevitably became the healing journey?
Yeah, so it's so again, like it's so interesting looking back because at the time, like I felt like I was just a mess. I was just falling apart. Like there was like nothing good that I could like pinpoint at the time. But when I look back now, I realize that actually starting this journey, so my first step was getting myself a coach. So I was working with a woman's coach. She was absolutely incredible. Alice, she was a guest on the podcast. And as I was going through that process, one of the big things that like it kept on kind of coming back around and I kept on being confronted with this idea of that like I have to acknowledge my own worth. I have to acknowledge that I am worthy of being in the world. I am worthy of being the one that survived. Like I'm worthy of still being here. Like there was a lot of guilt and a lot of shame that I felt around, especially losing my aunt. Like that was a really, really big, like really, really big thing for me. I had been working away at a client in Ireland at the time, and I'd spoken to my mom, and my mom was like, she's not, it's my mom's sister. She was like, she's not doing very well. Like, we're not sure how long it's going to be. And I was like my flight is literally leaving tomorrow. I'll be there in like 48 hours. And I missed her by 12 hours. And like that just sat with me for so long. Like I felt so guilty that I wasn't there. And so to actually go back and be like, wow, like actually, that's not my fault. Like, just because that happened, like, it doesn't make me any less worthy of being here. Like, just like letting go of all of that guilt and that shame. And then understanding and accepting my lack of control in the world,
Mm.
because control was my coping mechanism. And because of the type of business I run and the type of work that I do and the work I did in corporate, like organizing and controlling and planning have always been my fallback. So to actually understand that I couldn't organize or plan my way out of this was such a massive thing that I had to embrace. I had to let go of this incessant need to be in control of everything all of the time, which felt horrific for me because even before the grief, like my friends will laugh if they listen to this, but when I was a kid, I had like a 10-year plan for my life. And I was like, I'm going to like buy a house at this age, get engaged at this age, get married at this age, have my first kid at this age. Like I was so set on what my life was going to look like. And I ticked off every single one of those things to the year, except for having kids. And it was only kind of at that point where I'd started my healing journey, I'd started releasing that control, I'd started actually asking myself, what is it that I actually want with my life? Like, I've had this plan in place since I was like 10. Did the 10-year-old me actually know what I wanted as an adult? Probably not. And I had to kind of go on this really like crazy journey of just like embracing who I am and understanding that like my happiness mattered. I'd spent so long looking after everybody else's happiness, especially when we started to lose people. I would kind of step in and just be like, like, let's do everything we can to make sure mom's okay. Let's do everything we can to make sure dad's okay. Let's do everything we can to make sure all of these people are okay. And that bled out into like every aspect of our lives. Like, I was over looking after my husband to make sure he was okay. I was over looking after my friends and the people that I worked with, like even my clients. I was so concerned that everyone around me had to be happy because if everyone around me was happy, they wouldn't notice that I wasn't. It was like, again, this massive protection mechanism. And it's so interesting because so many people have said to me, like, oh, I used to be so much bubblier before. And I'm like, no, I used to be faking it before. Now, this is actually who I am. This is actually my level of excitement. This is actually true to who I am. And before, the version of me that you saw was making it up because she didn't know what it meant to be happy. And that kind of like embracing those elements of myself and like figuring out who I actually was in the world was one of the hardest things I had to do to go on this journey. Like, yeah, it was so difficult.
And therein lies the courage that accompanies everyone's healing journey. I think you've just encapsulated it there. One of the things that I really wanted to, there's a couple of things I wanted to kind of draw out from what you said that I see in my clients a lot as well. Two specific things that I think seem to be really profound for you. And one is the response of control. I can't control what's going on in here, so I'm going to control everything else around me. And that is such a common response to not being able to deal with the overwhelm of emotion because you've never probably experienced anything to that extent ever before. I'm taking it from, you literally were like, I can plan this and I can achieve it and nothing's getting in my way. And you're like, this is the path. So much certainty and clarity. And not the disruption at all. Maybe challenges that you've bumped up against and you've overcome along the way, but by and large, it's all happening according to plan. And then, bosh, this happens. And there's an element of, I like when you talked about 10-year-old you making that plan. I think lots of us can relate to that. 10-year-old you had no idea about this kind of thing, the curveballs, what real life is like. And so not only are you confronted with the experience that you've had around the redundancy, getting married and what that brings up for you, as well as the obviously the bereavements, that's a heck of a lot of different things to try and wrap your head around, particularly when you sort of set in motion something that when you were at a much less informed age. So that was the sort of first thing I wanted to bring up. And the other thing is there seems to be something else around. Are you the one in the family that nobody really needs to worry about because you're just sorted? And so you have to live up to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like so if I think back in my avoidance journey right at the beginning, I was in a really kind of stable relationship when I was younger, and like coming out of school and in college and stuff like that. And myself and that partner ended up breaking up. And my response to that was to buy a one-way ticket out of the country and literally go start traveling and go live my life. But that meant that from a really young age, from 19, I no longer lived with my parents or my family, and I looked after myself. Like, there were times in my journey of finding my own 2 feet where, like, my whole money that I earned in a month would pretty much go on rent, and I would have like one bag of pasta to eat for a whole week with like tomato sauce on top of it. And like, it was just like, I was just so used to figuring it out. And it's a really incredible skill that I have of like figuring things out and making things work and, pulling together random ideas and making a plan, that I never really thought about the fact that I could ask for help. I never really thought about the fact that I could be like, oh, actually, hey guys, I'm not doing so well. So, maybe somebody could give me a hand. And that was in every aspect of my life. Like, myself and my husband, when we got together, we did everything alone to buy our first property, to buy our second property, to get ourselves into debt, to get ourselves out of debt, to move countries. Like, we did everything by ourselves. There wasn't a single step of that process where somebody stepped in and did it for me. So I think like I just had this real sense of, I am strong, I'm independent, I've always gone at it by myself. So that's what I do, and that's how I exist. And there wasn't even a thought process of maybe there could be a better way.
Yeah. So true. And this is what happens at like an identity level. This is who I am. This is how I resolve things. This is my experience of the world. Even when things get tough or shitty, like I can sort it out. No one else needs to worry about me, and I don't need to, like you say, it just doesn't even enter your mind that asking for help is going to be the best option for you, or that you need it. And so it's so disconcerting, isn't it, to kind of be in that situation where you're kind of like, oh, I'm out of options, this has never happened before. But one question I really wanted to ask you, and I know that you've explored this with the people that you've interviewed as well, but when was the moment where you thought that you might not be able to make it, or you couldn't make it?
So there's two really significant moments that stand out for me. One was actually before I even started healing, and one was after I started, and that kind of like feeling the feelings and it being a lot. So we'll go for the one beforehand. And it's a really, really interesting thing because I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but kind of just in passing with another guest, and I want to just go into it in a bit more detail because I think it'll be helpful for people to understand. So when we were going through the process of losing my aunt. I had obviously just recently been made redundant, started my own business, picked up some really huge contracts, and I was basically working away from home all of the time. So I was driving like 3,000 miles a month across the UK to all different clients and offices, and I was flying all over the place. And it gave me a lot of time by myself and a lot of time to think. And sometimes those are not the best things when you don't have the mechanisms and the coping strategies that you need to deal with your feelings. So I remember like really vividly driving back along. So if anyone knows the UK, I was working just outside Cambridge in Peterborough, and I was driving along the motorway. There was loads of roadworks on that motorway for years, if anyone remembers back then. And I was driving along the motorway, and there was traffic rushing on the other side, and I was driving down. And I remember just thinking to myself, I could literally just turn the car into the oncoming traffic, and all of the pain will stop and I will never have to feel it again. Now, I just want to like reiterate in this moment, I was not suicidal. I was not a risk. I was never going to actually take action on that. I never thought of harming myself in any other way. Like I was not a risk at all. But it was so interesting because again, in that moment, I didn't reach out for help. I didn't tell anybody how I was actually feeling. Well, actually, that's a lie. I told my husband. Like, my husband is my absolute safe anchor. Like, I tell him everything. His response was, "Don't you dare." And I was like, "Of course I won't. It's fine." But, like, I never told my family or my friends or, anybody close to me because I never felt at risk. Like, I never actually felt like I would do anything off the back of that. But it was genuinely just how much pain I was holding, how much I just wasn't doing anything with those emotions, that they would just kind of bubble over every now and again in these sort of very kind of shocking ways that even scared me at the time. I was kind of like, whoa, I can't believe I've just had that thought. Like, I've never ever been somebody to have suicidal thoughts or to, like, I hadn't even really recognized that I had depression at that point. So, like, it was just like very shocking. And I think the big thing now, where I've kind of discussed this with a guest before, it's gone out into the world. And like having the discussion with my sister, I think that my fear always, and like it kind of was realized, was that my sister messaged me and said to me, like, "I'm so sorry you felt this way and you didn't feel like you could talk to me about it." And I had to go back to her and be like, that wasn't the story. Like, that wasn't the situation. I didn't not talk to you because I couldn't talk to you. I didn't talk to you because I didn't feel like I needed to talk about it. And sitting here now, years down the line, I know that actually I probably did need to talk about it and I probably did need to deal with what was going on. But it was never a case of like, I thought I couldn't lean on my family or talk to my family. Like there was no reflection of them in that moment. It was completely a reflection of me. And I think that that's so important for people to realize in a healing journey is a lot of the time we put expectations on other people to like save us, or we put pressure on those relationships with other people while we keep the mask up and don't tell them anything and kind of hope that they'll figure it out themselves because they're close or they know or, you know. But for me specifically, everyone in my family had lost somebody in this process. Everyone in my family was going through their own grief cycle, was trying to navigate this whole process themselves. And if I couldn't notice it in them, of course they couldn't notice it in me. Like, of course they couldn't. Like, it's so easy to see that now. But at the time, like, you're obviously just so in it that it's really hard. So that was kind of one of the first moments where I genuinely was like, I don't actually know if I can hold all of this pain anymore. Like, I don't know if I can deal with this. And then I spent a couple of years getting really good at just squishing my emotions and just pretending like they didn't exist. And when I started working with Alice, the woman's coach that I worked with, she said something really profound to me that it's stuck with me my whole life. And she basically said to me that your capacity to feel goes in both directions. So if you squish the grief and you don't feel the grief, you can't feel the joy. And you basically like you limit your feelings in all directions. Is that really how you want to live? And I was like, no, absolutely not. Like, I want to feel extreme joy again in my life. Like, I want to feel extreme happiness and, pleasure and like all of these like amazing emotions. I want to feel them. I don't want to not feel them anymore. Which means I kind of had to lift the lid on like the pain and the grief and the guilt and the shame and like all of these horrible things that were kind of festering below. And we did it was like a meditative process in my healing journey and sort of like somatic coaching. And I remember Alice kind of talking me through like we were going to go into these emotions. We were going to feel these emotions. We were going to release them. We were going to like, life was going to be good after this. And I remember in the meditation, just constantly feeling like I was standing on the edge of this ledge, like back against a wall, edge of a ledge, toes hanging over, and there just being this black abyss below me, and just like being so scared of it, like so scared of it, not knowing what was down there, not really wanting to find out. And we kind of went through this whole process. It took a couple of months, but finally I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm just going to jump off the edge of the cliff. We're just going to find out like how strong I am. Let's go. And like in that moment of like having that like out of body experience of just kind of like leaping off the edge of the world and being like, I can handle it. Like it'll be fine. And then landing and realizing that like all of the light that I needed was in me all of the time.
Mm.
Like the only reason that it was darkness down there is because I wasn't there yet. And I had everything I needed to like deal with what I needed to deal with. And that was like, for so long, I was like, I can't take that step. 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 Like, it's too scary. It's too big. I can't feel all those feelings. I can't handle it. I'm not strong enough. And the moment that I released all of that and I was able to metaphorically take that step and go and feel those things, there was just this massive shift in what I realized I could handle. And I was like, whoa, like I'm so much more powerful than I ever gave myself credit for. Like, what on earth? Like, it was one of the scariest, but one of the best moments, I think, in my healing journey, like all in one.
So those dark moments, or those moments, not necessarily even dark, but those moments where you kind of have like that sense of I'm not sure I can make this, actually have served a purpose. Is that right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
And that leads us on very nicely onto, I think, the next question that I want to ask you, which is, what's the biggest change, do you think, in your outlook on life?
Yeah, so one of my biggest shifts, I think, and it's almost like twofold, but the same thing, is that I am responsible. Like I'm responsible for what happens to me, what has happened to me. And I don't mean as in like bad things happen and it's my fault. I don't mean it like that. I just mean it in the sense of I realized the biggest change for me as I was going through this process is that when I take responsibility for myself, the way that I feel, the way that I respond to things, what I'm doing is actually taking back my power. I'm actually saying I'm never going to farm out my happiness or my success or my ability to live life, or I'm not going to farm out anything to anybody else. I'm not going to wait for somebody to fix me or save me. And it's really, I don't know if you know much about archetypes, but there's this really kind of beautiful princess versus queen archetype. And a lot of people know about like the victim archetype, where you're, playing the victim, sitting thinking, woe is me, everything always, everything bad always happens to me. And then there's this princess archetype, and she is like the damsel in distress. but she's so perfect. She's so pretty. She's so well mannered. She's so well behaved. She fits into society so well that everyone thinks that that is what you should be. Like this princess waiting for somebody to come save you, waiting for, the clients to come along, the job to give you a promotion, whatever it is, the outcome to arrive. And the biggest change for me was realizing that I am not a princess. I am an absolute motherfucking queen.
I love that.
And I am completely in control. Like a queen doesn't wait for somebody to come and save her. She doesn't sit around and think, oh, well, if this doesn't happen, somebody else will fix it. She's like, I make the rules, I make the plans, I make like I take the action, I set the direction, I tell the country that these are the rules we're going to live by, and this is how we go. And like that was the biggest shift for me is I just came away from this idea of like one day something will make me happy. And I was like, I'm going to be happy right now. And to hell with anybody who tells me that I can't, because I am in control of this. And it was such a shift from being, I mean, I think every woman probably has struggled with being a people pleaser, with, sitting around and waiting for other people to say that we can. Like there's that whole kind of good girl myth of what we should be. And breaking out of that and just being like, actually, I'm done waiting. I'm done waiting for somebody to say, yes, you can move home, or yes, you can get out of debt, or yes, you can, run your business the way you want to. Like, there were so many things in my life that I was kind of skirting around the edges of, thinking, oh, one day they'll be better, one day it'll be okay. And actually, when this shift happened, like, and now when I go into things, I have to constantly remind myself, because obviously healing is forever. I constantly have to pull myself up and be like, am I being a princess right now? Like, am I being a princess or am I being a queen? Because I'm pretty sure that if I was being a queen, I'd have what I want already. And it's like this really nice archetype dynamic to play with. But that was like the biggest change for me, is just taking radical responsibility for myself and everything around me and saying it's my responsibility, nobody else's.
I really love that. Those examples are so clear as well, aren't they? And they come back to that idea that we were bringing up earlier about how this happens at an identity level, because inevitably the healing journey starts when what you thought to be true about yourself somehow isn't, or what you expected about life somehow isn't. And those elements seem to be present in so many people's journeys. So to have those almost sort of external representations that you could be using to help steer, who is it that I want to be, and how do I want to show up, and how am I going to use that to empower myself to not wait for one day, but to make today the day, or now the moment. That is so powerful. Which leads me on to, how did you find your purpose and start the work?
So it's really, really interesting because I, like, deep down inside me, I always knew that I'd run my own business. I didn't know how, I didn't know what it would be or what it would look like, or like I had no idea really, but I knew. I loved the idea of being my own boss. I loved the idea of having that freedom and like all that came with. And to be fair, before I started my own business, I was slightly wearing rose tinted glasses as to what it would look like. But I think everyone does. Otherwise, we wouldn't start, let's be honest. So when I got made redundant, I had this like real moment of being like, okay, this is my moment. Like, I can take this redundancy package and I can decide that I'm going to start my own business and I'm going to do this and like it's going to be good. And I instantly got a contract. So, for anyone who doesn't know my kind of corporate background, I was a trainer, I was working in insurance, I was training, induction training, and um, like management skills and all of that kind of good stuff, organizational change, all of that. And I got this contract, and it was like more than half of my annual salary I was going to earn in like 10 weeks. And I was like, whoa, like this like blew my mind. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I got my next contract, and my next contract was even bigger, and it was with a massive global organization. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm on to something here, like six figures, like pulling out 5K salary months. Like my husband was working part-time. We were living the best, like, like all of the boxes were ticked in like life should be so perfect. But I was literally working 17-hour days. I was away from home for 5 days a week and like also Sunday evening. So like 5.5 days. And then on Saturdays, I basically just spend the whole of Saturday bulk cooking for the week, doing laundry and repacking bags, and then be off again. So I was like, actually, everything, as you said, that should have been correct in the world, that should have said I was doing well in the world, that should have made me happy, wasn't working. And then slammed into all of that was all of this grief and all of this pain. And like my nervous system was so overloaded, it didn't know what to do with itself. So as I kind of went on my own healing journey and I started to realize, like, actually, what I want to do is I want to run a business online and I want to help other people also run their own online businesses so that they don't have to go through this like extreme burnout of working all over the world and like doing all of these things. So I started my first online program and oh, I was so ill informed. Like it was mental. It was absolutely mental. I was like, so I decided to start my own online business before COVID even happened. And it took me 6 weeks from start to finish to decide what I was going to do, write a program, create the program, get it online, sell it, get clients. Like it was so quick because I had a master's in education and learning and I knew exactly how to create a program. So then I went out to my clients and I was like, in 6 weeks, we're going to have this amazing outcome. And none of them could do it in 6 weeks because none of them knew how to create an offer. And I was like, okay, so we're going to do another 6 weeks and I'm going to show you how to create your offer. And it just kind of went like this. And this program just kind of grew legs and it just became this like massive thing. And it was really cool. And like it started to be like the thing that I was doing. And it was all about business. It was all about strategy and funnels and like very kind of masculine in the way of doing things. But the more that I healed and the more that I learned about my nervous system and, all of the things that I actually did to help my own journey, the more that I realized that what I was teaching my clients wasn't actually going to get them the results. Like it was the skills that they needed, but they didn't have the belief that sat behind it like I did. So I added in another program, which was called Soul Code at the time. And it was all about this kind of healing journey. It was all about your boundaries and your vision and like the much more kind of feminine touch. But I kept them very separate because I was like, oh, the people over here, as much as I know they need to know this, they might find it a bit too out there. Like, I can't put those two things together. Like I was so, I was so worried. But you could see even from then, that was like back in I think 2021, I launched Soul Code. It was like even from then you could see this merging of like everything trying to be forced together. And really interestingly, I had a birth chart reading in 2021. And in that birth chart reading, I was like told, and it's like the only thing that's really stuck with me in the whole reading, but I was told that in my future there was this idea of like an ancient amphitheater and me having this platform where I was going to share this like message that people needed to hear, this like core thing that people needed to know, they needed to hear. Like, and me in my typical organization mode came out of that and went straight into, okay, what's the thing? How do I do it? How do I get it into the world? And I started writing my first book. That book never saw the light of day. Then I started writing my second book. That book also never saw the light of day because they just weren't right. Like I was just trying to force a result because I had this thought that there was something I was supposed to be doing and I couldn't just give into it and just like let it be. And at the beginning of this year, I wasn't like a podcast wasn't even on the list of things I was going to do. Like it wasn't even on the list of things I was going to do. I was going to attempt to write another book and actually finish it this time. Like I was so determined that I was going to get something out into the world. And then suddenly I just had this like absolute clarity of like, oh no, the thing is not going to be talking about business. It's not going to be talking about how to make more money. Like, it's not going to be talking about any of the things I always thought would be the message that I would be bringing into the world. And I was sitting on the women's retreats that we run. So we run International Women's Retreat, the Fearless You retreat. I was sitting on the retreat and I was looking at the people around me, and not a single one of them ran their own business. And I was like, this is where I am most happy. Like, this space and talking to these women and helping them, not with their businesses, but just with who they are and how they show up in the world and what is important to them. Like, this is what it's about. And I came off that call and I spoke to my business coach and I was like, I'm starting a podcast. And she was like, what now? And I was like, yeah, and it's going to be out in the next like 8 weeks. And she was like, what now? And I was like, and I'm going to interview guests, and I've already got guests lined up. And she's like, and the podcast literally like flowed out of me in a way that I didn't think was possible. Like, and again, like that whole idea of that identity shift of the moment I stopped trying to control the outcome, stopped trying to say I am the person who needs to decide what this looks like and be in control of this. And I just embraced this idea of I'm going to just run the retreats and enjoy them. I'm going to run the program and enjoy it. I'm just going to do the things and figure it out. And when it's right, it'll be right. And it just landed so fast after that, like in that moment. And I think that that has always been this kind of process for me in, doing the online business program, doing Soul Code, merging them all together, starting to run the retreats. Like, it's the whole idea of the work is just being of service to people. I have no idea what that'll look like in 5 years, in 10 years. I have no idea if I'll be running the same programs or running the same podcast, or whether I will have finally written the damn book and gotten it out into the world. I have no idea. But for the first time in my life, I actually feel really comfortable with that. And I think that that is the work. Like, that is what you need to achieve, is just feeling so comfortable in yourself and in your abilities that it doesn't actually matter what the path is. It doesn't actually matter where you're going. You just know that it's going to be good.
Oh, I love that. And it's so interesting, isn't it? Like, whenever you look back, you can see how the path, it's never linear. It's always like go down here and go down there. But there's so often this theme as well of the moment you let go, the moment you surrender, the moment you drop some of the conditioning that you've been carrying around, the shoulds, it should look like this, and just go, let it go. Then the next kind of door opens, and I remember the excitement with which you shared the news about this podcast, and literally it's just since then just and that's testament, isn't it, to that approach, like trying to write the books and it just not feeling easy. And we challenge that all the time, don't we? We think, well, if I'm not afraid of hard work, and hard work's a good thing, and everything else. But then there comes a point where it's like, this really is like, not the right thing, and I've got to be okay with maybe not knowing for a little while. Which brings me on to, I really would love to know, and everybody I'm sure would really love to know, what is your advice for someone that's going through, what should we call it, like an awakening?
So I think the biggest thing for me is move your body and feel your feelings. I cannot encourage people enough to move their bodies. Like, I read this incredible statement. I think I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but I read this incredible statement which basically said that your body can never lie to you. So if you want to know what to do, listen to your body, and don't listen to your mind, because your mind always lies to you. And I think there's such wisdom in understanding that your body always knows, your body keeps score, your body, like the pain you have in your body is indicating something to you. Like your nervous system is holding you all together and telling you exactly what you need to know. And if you don't do something with that and you don't work through that, it's always going to just keep coming up for you. So I remember when I finally kind of admitted that I had depression, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I never thought I would be somebody who had depression, and now I am. I had this really big moment of being like, and like I've got nothing against going on meds, like I've got nothing, people who take meds absolutely fine, but they didn't seem like the right thing for me. So I had already had massive like issues with my menstrual cycle because of meds I'd been on, and I was like, I can't put anything more into my body, like I can't deal with this. So this thought process of like the doctors being like, you need to go on meds, and me being like, mm-mm, I'm not doing that, like not a chance. I was like, okay, like what else? Like what else can I do? And I started researching it and like finding people who had like been through depression themselves and like hearing what they'd been doing. And somebody was like, just run, just run. And I was like, I hate running. Like I used to bunk, maybe I shouldn't say this out loud on my podcast. Mom and dad, forgive me. I used to bunk sports day every time we had one. um, so this is one of the joys of being vulnerable on a live stream. So like I had like never done sports, like never been into like being the fit person, like never really gone to the gym, and I literally put on my running shoes and I started running, and I started going out every single day. And then I got a dog, like I call her my anti-depression dog. She's still with us now. She came over from the UK with us back to South Africa. And like she forced me to go out every single day and get into the sunshine, get into the rain, get into like whatever was going on. I had to get up and get out and like do it for her. She was only a puppy at the time when we got her. It was great. Um, but genuinely, moving my body was the biggest thing, and I still do it to this day. So it has been the most consistent thing I have done. And yes, I've done meditation and I've done journaling and I've gone for therapy and I've done yoga, and I've used so many modalities. I've pulled cards, like I've done so many things for my healing journey, but the most consistent is running. And it started with barely being able to run 2 kilometers, dying every step of the way, hating the process, thinking I'll never be able to do this without like a podcast blaring in my ears, to like just this weekend, I ran a half marathon just listening to myself pant the whole way around and loved it. Like, loved it more than I can describe. But genuinely, when you move your body, you give yourself space to feel your feelings. You give yourself space to work through what is going on for you. And that is what you need to do. Like, that is my advice. Find a way to move your body, run, cycle, like dance. I don't care. Do anything you want, but move 100%.
Oh, I love that. And it makes you feel so resourceful, because whatever you've got going on, there's often times you just can't think your way out of it at that point in time. And so there's always something you can do, no matter what your range of ability is with your body, whether it's breathing or just noticing your body, go, because day to day you just even forget that it's there, like doing so many incredibly powerful things for you second by second. So such a great tip. And there's the other part of this, of course, that you've already alluded to, that the healing never really seems to stop, which it'd be good to hear how you kind of like realize that, but also what is the next level of healing that you're doing.
Yeah. So this idea of realizing that the healing never stops, I think like it was a shock. It was like a shock awakening. So I'd like gone through this whole thing I had like dealt with my depression and was like doing so much better and like running my business and doing these massive launches and like things felt good. But I still kept on looking at this idea of like, we were still in debt. We were still living in the UK. We were still away from our family. Like there were still so many things that hadn't corrected in my mind. And that's when I started to realize, like, oh, there's another level of identity that I have to shift here. Oh, there's another thing that I have to do. And like, I mean, most people have this idea that like it's normal to get into debt. We take out mortgages, we rent cars on finance, like it's like a normal thing. And so shifting this identity of like, it's no longer normal for me and it's no longer acceptable for me, and actually going from like we'd been paying off our debt like slowly over a couple of years to me being like, screw this debt is going to be gone by the end of this year, I'm done now. And then like hitting that target. But there was a massive identity shift that had to happen with that. And then the next thing was like me wanting to move back to South Africa. So we'd been living in the UK for 15 years. My husband had kind of been on and off with the fact that we would go home, we would never go home, we would go home, we would never go home. He never committed to anything. And I made the shift of like, I will live back home. Like, I will. I didn't say anything to him, but just like energetically, I was like, I'm going to live in South Africa. I'm going to live a good life. Like, I'm done with this place. And don't get me wrong, the UK was incredible to us. Like, I love the fact that we lived there. I made so many connections. We got into such a good position. I've got nothing against anybody who's trying to go to the UK and do their thing. Like, do it. It's brilliant. But it just wasn't for me anymore. I was just done. And again, like I decided that in the December, and in the January, we were sitting on the sofa and my husband turned to me, and for the first time in 15 years, he just said, fuck it, I want to go home. And I'm not even kidding you. I pretty much had flights booked before I got off that sofa. I was like, I'm not letting him change his mind. And like within 5 months, we'd moved home. We were out of debt. And we literally went from like being in debt for like 5, 6 years in the UK in a 2-bed house, in a tiny little seaside town, to living in the most incredible 4-bed house, which is we bought it cash. We bought both of our cars cash. Like the identity shift was mental. I was just like, who is this person and where was she 5 years ago? Like, this is incredible. But every time you get to that new identity, you realize there's another identity. You realize there's another thing you need to shift, another thing that is out of reach for you at the moment because of your beliefs, because of how you've been brought up, because of the constructs of the society you live in, because of all of these big things that are just around us all of the time and how we like expect life to be. And so for me, the next big thing, and like secretly, this is something I've wanted to do since 2019. And this just shows you how long the healing identity journey shift actually sometimes takes. Because in 2019, when I was starting this whole kind of like healing journey, and I knew I needed to move my body and I knew I needed to do something different, I started to do yoga like loads more. And I really, really wanted to go and become a yoga teacher, not to actually teach yoga to anyone, because I don't think that that is what I'll do, but I never say never. Maybe I will one day. But it was more just that learning that you get, that like grounding that you get from becoming a master in something, and that like learning that would come off the back of it. And for so long I was like, I'm so scared to like say this out loud. Like people will think it's too far out there, it's too weird, it's like nowhere close to what I actually do, like it won't fit, like it won't make sense with my business, it's too much money to spend. Like I had this whole list of reasons why I couldn't. And at the beginning of this year, I was like, you know what, I know all the reasons why I shouldn't. I know all the reasons why I can't. I know all the reasons why it doesn't make sense. But everything inside me still wants to do this. Everything inside me still knows that this is the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. I have no idea why. I have no idea how. I have no idea like what it's supposed to look like. But this year, for the first year, I've actually penned the month-long yoga training into my calendar and I'm like, I don't know how this is going to happen, but this is what I'm going to be doing for this whole month. Like, I'm going to be going away and doing this thing. And in that process, like, I just get like shivers. Like, my body literally gets goosebumps when I talk about it. But like, I know that I'm going to unlock so much about myself in that moment. And I think that this is something really important for people to understand is healing doesn't always have to be off a trauma. It doesn't always have to be something heavy and something hard. And, yes, shifting your identity, like there's work to be done. Of course there is. But it doesn't always have to be this massive traumatic thing. This shift, I'm excited about. Like it's new, it's big, it's scary, but it's so exciting. And I think that that is the difference for me. And I know, like, you know this because of all the things that you do, but fear and excitement feel exactly the same in the body. You can literally decide what it is you're feeling, and it's the context that you give it that makes it so. So when I think about this yoga retreat and I think about going and learning to be a yoga teacher, there are fears. There are like thoughts of, how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to run my business while I'm away for a whole month? How am I going to, is my body going to be able to do this? Because we'll be doing yoga like 3 times a day, every single day. And I'm like, I don't know if my body can do that. Like, how am I going to deal with not running while I'm there? Because running is such a tool that I use. Like, there's so many questions. And I keep leaning into this with this like really excited energy of like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna like be able to see what my body's capable of. I'm gonna be able to see how far I've come. I'm gonna be able to see what's possible for me. I'm gonna be able to see how I manifest the money and the time and the support and like everything that I need to make this possible for me, because I know that this is the next thing. I know that this is what needs to happen. And it's like, it's such a shift from that first moment of realizing I need to heal to the moment now where I'm like, oh, look, there's an interesting identity that I don't want anymore. Now I need to heal it. And like, it's like so much lighter and so much more fun because I have this massive toolkit of like all of the things that I know that I need to do. And I know I can pull on and I can, the people I can lean into. I've got this whole community and it's just such a different feeling. So I think for anyone who is going on this journey, starting this journey feeling super overwhelmed, like it does get easier. It is going to be okay. Like that's the beauty of this thing. Like you're so much stronger than you know you are. And I think like that is just so powerful, like as you go on this journey.
What an incredible message that is just so filled with hope and resilience and optimism, just knowing that and seeing the threads of your journey. Thank you so much for sharing the whole of it in one episode so that we can see exactly what you've learned, the processes that you're still applying for yourself. And I don't know about anybody else, but I did get the goosebumps when you were talking about your yoga retreat, learning all of that. So congratulations, and I can't wait to see the next chapter unfold for you as well.
Thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of the Diary of Discovery. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends, family, or anyone else you think might benefit from the stories of hope and transformation. Your feedback means the absolute world to us, so please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews help us to reach even more listeners and continue to bring this meaningful content to the world. Until next time, remember, your healing journey is valid. You are never alone, and you have the strength to get through this. Keep shining bright, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Diary of Discovery.